I had never seen a grown woman slap a baby before, but there I was, frozen in horror, watching as Madam Jola slapped a toddler hard on the back, her fat fingers smacking against his soft skin. The little boy wailed, his tiny body shaking from the force. All I could do was stand there, too shocked to move. This wasn't what I signed up for. The daycare looked innocent enough when I joined, just a simple, affordable place for civil servants' children. The building was worn out, the walls chipped, and there were only a few old toys scattered around. But it was still a place where you'd expect kindness, a safe spot for children to be taken care of. I had seen the kids' faces lit up when their parents left them in Madam Jola's care, and it never crossed my mind that things would be different once they walked out the door. But here, in front of me, was the real face of the mommy daycare everyone praised for being cheap and reliable. And I was just starting to scratch the surface of all the things hidden beneath. I started working at mommy daycare just 2 weeks ago. I needed the job, and Madam Jola didn't ask too many questions during my interview. She only cared that I showed up on time and kept quiet. No necessary talking, she said in that stern voice of hers, not even bothering to smile. I thought she was just strict. I was wrong. Madam Jola wasn't just strict, she was cruel. She ran the daycare with an iron fist, and her word was final. The children were quiet and withdrawn, too scared to misbehave. They learned quickly that disobedience came with harsh punishments. Even babies learned to keep their cries to a minimum. At first, I thought maybe I was misunderstanding things, maybe I was too sensitive. But then, I saw the way she yanked them by the arm, shoved food in their mouths until they choked, and slapped them for wetting themselves. The worst part was, nobody else seemed to notice or care. The other staff were just as afraid of her as the children were. The routine was strict, and any delay was punished harshly. Children were fed on tight schedule, one spoon after another, no breaks. They barely had time to swallow. Nap time was even worse. If the child didn't fall asleep immediately, Madam Jola would press down on their shoulders, forcing them to stay still until they drifted off terrified. It felt wrong to stay quiet, but I needed this job. My family depended on it. I was torn, but I kept my head down, hoping things would get better, that maybe I was just seeing things out of context. The cribs were cramped and most of the blankets were torn and thin. I asked once if we could get new toys or at least fix the cribs. Madam Jola gave me a look that silenced me immediately. "Do you think this is Banana Island?" she sneered. "These are civil servants' children. They don't need luxury." The kids were given watery pap, and that's if they were lucky. Some days, Madam Jola would lock up the kitchen and say they had eaten already. The kids cried in hunger, their little hands reaching out for anything they could get. One day, I snuck a piece of bread to a girl named Adobe, and Madam Jola caught me. She warned me with a cold, hard glare that no one is here to pamper spoiled children. After that, I tried to keep my head down and just do my work. But every day, I saw something that made my stomach churn. And I began to wonder if I was the only one who noticed the darkness hiding in this place. One day, a boy named Tunde started coughing badly. His tiny chest rattled with each breath, and I panicked, telling Madam Jola we should call his parents or take him to a doctor. She waved it off, saying kids cough all the time. He'll be fine. She dragged him to the corner, threw a dirty blanket over him, and left him there. As the days went on, his coughing grew worse. I could see his face turning pale, his lips dry and cracked. I tried to bring him water, but Madam Jola caught me again and gave me a slap on the wrist. "Do you want them to think we don't take care of the children?" she hissed, a twisted look of pride on her face. By the end of the day, Tunde was barely moving. I knew then that this place was more than just neglectful. It was dangerous, and if I stayed silent any longer, I'll just be as guilty as Madam Jola. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tunde's face haunted me. The kids at mommy daycare weren't just being mistreated, they were being harmed, ignored, and starved. I knew I had to do something, but I was terrified. Who would believe me? Madam Jola had connections in the area, and most of the parents were too grateful for affordable daycare to question anything. I decided to talk to one of the other staff members, a girl named Chika, who had been there longer than me. I found her during lunch break and whispered, "Have you seen what she does to the kids?" Chika gave me a quick fearful glance and shook her head, muttering, "If you want to keep this job, you better keep your mouth shut." That's when I realized why the other staff stayed silent. They couldn't afford to lose their jobs. They depended on the little money they got from Madam Jola, and crossing her was out of the question. The next day, I decided to document everything I saw. I hid my phone in my pocket, pressing record whenever Madam Jola started her usual things. I captured her yelling at the children, threatening them, even hitting a baby who wouldn't stop crying. It made me sick, but I knew I needed proof if I wanted anyone to believe me. One evening, a mother picked up her child and noticed a bruise on his arm. She asked Madam Jola what happened, and Madam Jola quickly lied, saying he'd fallen while playing. The mother seemed concerned, but accepted the answer, leaving without another word. I knew that if I had showed her the recordings, she would understand the truth, but I didn't dare. Yes. I kept recording for a week, collecting as much evidence as I could. Each day, my fear grew, but so did my resolve. I was no longer just scared, I was angry. These kids deserved better, and it was up to me to do something about it. One day, Madam Jola told me to take out the trash behind the building. As I lifted the lid of the bin, I found broken toys, old, torn clothes, and moldy food. She was throwing away supplies instead of giving them to the children, keeping everything to a bare minimum. The parents didn't know any of this. They trusted her to take care of their kids. I felt a surge of anger as I looked at the waste. This was a daycare, not prison. Why did she treat it like one? I took pictures of the bin's contents and added them to my collection of evidence. My heart pounded as I made my way back inside. I knew that sooner or later I would have enough proof to expose her. But Madam Jola was getting suspicious. She kept watching me with narrowed eyes, her gaze lingering whenever I got too close to the kids or the supplies. I knew I had to act fast before she caught on what I was doing. The final straw came when she locked a child in the bathroom for the entire day. The child, a little girl named Amaka, had spilled her food by accident, and Madam Jola dragged her by the arm and locked her up, saying, "Since you're wasting food, you don't get to eat any today." I heard Amaka crying from behind the door, and I couldn't take it anymore. I went to Chika and I said, "Enough is enough. This is wrong, and we have to do something." Chika just shook her head, too scared to get involved, and whispered, "If you want to get involved, that's on you, but leave me out of it." I took a deep breath and decided to go to the authorities myself. If no one would help, I would. I couldn't stay by and let this continue. That night, I went to a police station and explained everything to an officer. I showed him the recordings, the photos, and told him about the locked bedroom incident. The officer listened, his face growing darker with each piece of evidence. "We'll look into it," he said, and I felt a small sense of relief. Finally, someone was taking me seriously. The following morning, officers arrived at the daycare while parents were dropping off their children. They pulled Madam Jola aside, and I watched as her face went pale, realizing that her reign of terror was finally coming to an end. The parents watched in shock as the officer handcuffed her and led her away. Some of the parents approached me, asking what had happened, and I explained everything. Their faces turned from disbelief to horror as they realized the truth. Once Madam Jola was taken away, the daycare was temporarily shut down. Parents scrambled to find other arrangements, and I helped them as much as I could, even offering to babysit until they found proper daycare. My heart felt lighter knowing the kids were finally free from her cruelty. The police investigations brought more horrors to light. They found records of funds she'd embezzled and evidence of severe neglect hidden away in the daycare storage room. Each discovery left me more shaken, but I was relieved that it was finally over. I testified against her in court alongside a few brave parents who shared their own suspicions with the evidence I'd gathered. It was enough to ensure she wouldn't come back to hurt those kids again. After the daycare closed, a local church offered to set up a temporary daycare center for the children. They welcomed me as a staff member, and I accepted the offer gladly. The environment was completely different, warm, welcoming, and safe. The kids could finally play without fear, and I could see smiles slowly returning to their faces. The parents were incredibly grateful, many of them apologizing for not realizing what was happening sooner. I didn't blame them. Madam Jola had hidden her cruelty well, and it wasn't easy to see behind her fake kindness. With each passing, I felt a little more hopeful. The kids were healing, and so was I. The parents organized a small event to thank me and the other staff for caring about their kids. It was humbling seeing them come together, grateful that someone had stepped up. I never imagined I'd be in this position, but it was rewarding to know that we had made a difference. The kids came running to hug me, and I realized just how much I had grown attached to them. The nightmare of mommy daycare was finally over, replaced by a sense of hope and community that I hadn't felt before. I had found a purpose in caring for those kids, and as difficult as it had been, I wouldn't change a thing. Word spread around the neighborhood about what had happened to mommy daycare, and it sparked a bigger conversation about the quality of childcare. People started demanding better options and stricter regulations. Parents shared their own stories and banded together to push for change. I watched with pride, knowing I'd play a small part in it. The church daycare became more organized, getting even donations to buy new toys and supplies. The kids were happier, healthier, and finally getting the care they deserved. Seeing them like this was a healing experience for all of us. In a way, mommy's daycare's closure became a blessing, showing the community the importance of safety and kindness for their children. Looking back, I still feel the weight of what I witnessed at mommy daycare, but I also feel proud. I may have been terrified, but I had done the right thing. The children were safe and the community was stronger than before. I'm still working with the children, helping them laugh, play, and grow without fear. And each time they call me auntie, I am reminded that I didn't just save them from harm. I helped give them a place to be children again. It's a story I'll never forget.